hope that if you're visiting with us especially, you will feel welcome here no matter who you are or how you make your living, no matter how you experience the sacred or whom you love. We hope that you will feel welcome here in the fullness of your being. If there's something on your heart this morning that you would like shared aloud during our service, we have a memory book in the back of the sanctuary. There's candles you can light. You can write something down, or you can simply light one for a private memory or prayer. Whoa, and here we are. We're talking this week about what's behind the mask of safety. We're in this worship series exploring masks and their ways that we hide ourselves, maybe even from ourselves, and how we make that authentic, real contact with others in the world. So I invite you to, keep whatever mask you need on, take whatever mask you need off, and let's be together in this dance of safety and vulnerability. Would you rise in body or in spirit? And we're going to sing together a first hymn. This is a hymn called, it's up there, How could anyone ever tell you you're anything less than beautiful? And when we're singing this, you might need to close your eyes and sing it to yourself, but if you are so moved, if you're willing to risk a moment of dropping some mask, to look around and make eye contact and sing a line or two to someone else in the room. How could anyone?
Deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul.
Thank you, Keith.
Without a mic. Oh, and here we go. Good morning. I'm Smiley, and I am your worship associate today. And as Marcus lights our chalice, we begin our service. And we remind ourselves that our church occupies land in Huchiun, which is the unceded territory of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone Indians. People, my mistake. May we have the humility and courage to do our part to restore what has been broken, and also to have the wisdom to live in our new solidarity with indigenous communities and the earth. Let us kindle our chalice with these words by Shel Silverstein. Masks is the title, by Shel Silverstein. She had blue skin. So did he. He kept it hid. And so did she. They searched for blue their whole life through. then passed right by and never knew. Would you join me, please, in saying our covenant? Love guides this church. The quest for truth and justice is its common purpose. To give thanks, listen deeply, speak with care, honor our differences, and seek and grant forgiveness. These things we covenant with one another.
Remember when that was the only way we could get together? Good times. Okay, if you want to come up for a story, young folks or young at heart, come on up to the stairs. I've got a story to share with you. You can do it, Alana, Youth Council. Come on up. No, you don't have to. We had the pleasure of hosting our YRUU, Young Religious Unitarian Universalists of the Pacific Council Retreat. The leaders, our young leaders this weekend at our church. So thanks. Thanks for using our space and doing what you're doing. Thanks for coming up for this story. So this is a story about a professor who wanted to find out the true meaning of life. And he had studied near and far. He'd studied all the books he could possibly find about the true meaning of life. He studied books about science, and he studied books about mathematics. He studied books of poetry and books about religion. He'd studied so many things, and finally he came to the point where he said, I need to talk to some of the wisest people in the world if I'm going to pursue this quest any further. And so he went off to find a Zen master who, of course, as they do, had a little studio up on top of a mountain. And the professor came and sat across the table from the Zen master. And the Zen master warmly greeted the professor. She said, "Welcome, sit down. May I offer you a cup of tea?" And the professor said, "Oh, sure, yeah, but what I want to talk to you about is I'm trying to figure out how all of this information that I've learned fits together." And the Zen master began to pour the professor a cup of tea, and he kept talking. He said, but I still don't understand. The Buddha said, right, that you have this eightfold path, and there's Four Noble Truths, and I know that the eightfold path and the Four Noble Truths all mean that I should be practicing meditation, but I'm also trying to figure out how that fits with my understanding of what? It's raining on you. Is there water spill? And the professor looked down and he said, Stop! You're pouring tea all over the table. And the Zen master said, you have a very full cup. And before I teach you anything, you would have to empty it out. And I think about, have you ever pretended to know something, know more about something than you really know? I've done it. Yeah. Sometimes it's like it's the only thing that feels like it would be safe is to really know. But if we're going to learn, if we're going to grow, we have to start by emptying our cups. Will you rise in body or in spirit and join in singing our children out to their religious exploration? That's it. Go now.
The lone wild bird in a lofty flight is still with thee, nor leaves thy sight. And I am thine, I rest in thee, great Spirit, come and rest.
I love my father-in-law. And those of you who know my wife, Julia, probably will not be surprised when I tell you that he is a beautiful and very sweet man. And a case in point, the second day that I knew him, we were at the grocery store. I went there with Julia and her mom and dad. And I walked out of I went in the store and did my shopping, and I walked out of the store and I had a bag in each hand. And he looked at me. Steve was right outside the door when I left the building. And he looked at me and he says, "Smiley, you're a well-balanced guy." And I dropped the bags real quick and I ran over to Julia and I said, "It's going really good. Your dad thinks I'm well-balanced." The second day. And speaking of food, how many of you do intermittent fasting? Oh, quite a few. You know, you're supposed to eat a meal and then wait a while because then it's healthier for you. Well, I do intermittent fasting regularly. And let me give you an example. I go to the Greasy Spoon and I get an omelet and greasy potatoes and 2 orders of toast. And I don't eat again until about 20 minutes later when I go to the pizza joint. And that's a true story. I've done it many times. It really is a true story because I am a compulsive eater. And in many ways, my thin body is a decoy because I don't eat too many calories. But at any rate, I am a compulsive eater and I go on binges. And that's a mask for me. It's definitely a mask. When I'm feeling emotionally uncomfortable, it may be shame, it may be guilt, whatever it is, I put the mask on and I overeat and I pretend that those feelings are not there. And then I can use my thin body as a decoy. And I love humor. But humor is also a tremendously gigantic mask for me. And I did a 20-week therapy, inner child workshop some years ago. And about midway through, I realized that therapy is not a drug. Therapy is a good thing. Humor is a drug for me. So for 2 weeks during this 20-week period, I withdrew humor from every single thing that I did. And because I realized it was a mask covering a lot of my emotional things I didn't want to talk about. At the end of the 20-week program, I wrote a poem about my experience in the program, and the thing where understanding what humor was for me was really important. And let me repeat the poem. It's called "And My Heart Will Always Remember." Of love's great depths, I've caught a glance. Of love's great risks, I've taken a chance to open my soul to pain and strife, only to bore my authentic life. To feel such pain and then realize I view the world with different eyes that see beauty more often than not, and courage and giving are new friends that I've got. I started my journey with toxic fear, and little by little, new strengths would appear. My journey was bolstered. My journey was bolstered by some good-hearted folks who cared for me without my jokes. And I hold in my heart the love of this group that gave me safe haven, a place to recoup, and my heart will always remember. And I find the same relationships here at UUCB, that I can be who I am and people love me. In fact, I've just figured out recently that the foundation to healing any trauma that I have has 2 components. The first half is vulnerability. Me talking about the masks I wear, me talking about my imperfections, my character defects, whatever they may be. And then someone who loves me with my masks the hidden stuff with my imperfections. And then when I tell more of my imperfections, more of my character defects, this person loves me even more. That's a magical combination for me. That is the foundation. The vulnerability I express and being loved as I am. And from there are many modalities to treat the various traumas that I go through, but that's the foundation. And I find that here at church as well. Thank you all very much.
Or spirit, and we'll sing just the last two verses, 4 and 5 of this hymn we've been working with this last month, Name Unnamed.
Name unnamed, hidden and shown, knowing and known, Gloria. Midwife of changes, skillfully guiding, drawing us out through the shock of the new. Woman of wisdom, deeply perceiving, never deceiving, freeing and leading in all that we do. Name unnamed, hidden and shown, knowing and known, Gloria. Daredevil gambler, risking and loving, giving us freedom to shatter your dreams. Life-giving loser, wounded and weeping, dancing and leaping, sharing and giving, heals and redeems. Name unnamed, hidden and shown, knowing and known, Gloria.
Oh, daredevil gamblers, life-giving losers, take a deeper breath with me. Take this moment to rest more comfortably in your seat, to feel your connection down to this good earth, to notice your breath. Moving in and out. Constant companion. O great mystery, Holy Spirit, beyond all knowing, we remember this morning together the truth that to give a gift, we risk disappointing someone we love. To prepare a meal, We risk the vegetables getting overcooked, the meat oversalted, the bottom of the pan scorched, the guests unsatisfied. To gather flowers, we risk their wilting. To dance, we risk losing the beat, feeling the fool, stepping on a partner's feet. To travel, to set sail, we risk the storm, we risk getting lost. To make art, we risk making a mess, being misunderstood. To take a lover, we risk being scorned. To get married, we risk divorce. To become pregnant, we risk miscarriage. To have children, we risk the inevitable, that they will grow up, that they will leave us, or we will lose them. To love is to risk. The deeper the love, the greater the risk. Daredevil gamblers, may this stillness, this quiet we hold among us, hold our nervous hearts in all their risk-taking. In this community of care and witness, we hold one another through the seasons of our lives and lift up those griefs and gratitudes, joys and sorrows among us. This week we offer healing thoughts of love with Andrea Brewer-Thompson for my daughter Anya. And we lift up with Mars in loving memory of Patrick, who taught the world to shine bright and be unabashedly themselves. Share gratitude with Catherine Hanway, so grateful for the support I've received from this community. The Pastoral Care Committee cards are such a blessing. Thank you. And Wynn shares welcoming support as multiple friends are isolating, recovering from COVID, and I feel isolated too. And may we hold in our collective love our music director, Brian Baker, and our organist, Katya. Brian having a rebound of COVID, and Katya dealing with sciatica. Healing thoughts for them both. For all that we have named, and all that yet remains in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts, may each of us know that what we bring here is held in the loving embrace of this community, and by a love whose name is beyond all knowing, a love that cannot and will not let us go. May it be so, and amen. About a decade ago, when I had just finished my internship here with you all and had finished doing a year of chaplaincy at our local hospitals, I set off to the faraway land of Rochester, New York, where the winters are very, very long. And this time of year, the director of religious education would always say this time of year is when people start getting a little crispy there. So I'm grateful to have sunshine. But the youth group there, I remember I was this very large congregation, and I was on a team of 5 ministers, and part of my portfolio was to work with the youth group. And the youth group would have its annual ritual at the beginning of the year of making a covenant. Many of you are familiar with this ritual. We put a piece of paper on the easel, or we get the whiteboard out, and we just ask, what is the covenant we want to make how do we want to be with each other in this group? How do we want to make sure that we can bring our whole selves here? What agreements, what promises do we need to make one another? And every year in this youth group, the ritual was to make sure that on that covenant was the words, safety third. I don't think they knew what was first or second. They just knew it wasn't safety. Having grown up in a culture that maybe has overemphasized safety, these teens were clear: in order to come alive, in order to be who we want to be in this space, in order to do what we want to do together, safety's on the list, but it's not first or second. How do we have enough safety without too much that stifles us, or too much that stifles others? I'm thinking about safety, of course, in the context of the war happening in Gaza. And I am one who agrees with the point of view that the war Israel is executing is not going to make the people of Israel safer in the long run. That war at this scale only perpetuates further war, further violence. But there is still this fundamental question, I don't know the answer: how do you protect your own sovereignty, whether you're a nation or a person? Your own experience of sovereignty while refusing to invade the sovereignty of another. How do we keep ourselves safe without making anybody else less safe? So I wonder, personally, just individually, interpersonally, what is it that you do? How do you keep yourself safe? Do you, like the professor, know too much? Do you get ahead of things and figure it all out? Or like Smiley was sharing about, do you use something or humor to protect yourself? One of the things I've noticed about myself, when I am afraid for my belonging, when I'm not sure I'm safe in the group, I hide my emotional truth. I bullshit. I hide my emotional truth, and you should know this about me. I have really good bullshit. You like my bullshit. My family likes my bullshit. It's top notch. Because I learned early that this was a good way to keep myself safe, to hide my emotional truth in relationship if I thought it might be dangerous to reveal it. So I smile and nod and pretend I agree with something that I don't really, or at least give the impression that maybe I do, maybe I don't. Pretend to be interested in something I'm not. Pretend to listen when I'm really daydreaming about my own ideas for a book I want to write. And really what it is checking a part of myself at the door, like we were talking about a couple weeks ago. It's hiding behind a mask of safety that keeps me less alive, less connected, less real. And so I'm trying to give it up. Help me out. There's a story I heard on a podcast called Invisibilia several years ago. They're talking about a Shell, the oil company, when they were looking at the dangerous level of accidents they were having on their oil rigs. I mean, just huge amounts of injuries and even death that would happen on a routine basis because of how dangerous the work was, right? And the culture was that the men on these rigs, all men, would just hunker down and soldier on and not talk about the impact of seeing their fellow workers maimed and killed on the job. You don't talk about it. That was the unwritten rule. And so out of this masculine bravado, the culture continued until one day, Claire Noir came into the picture. Shell hired Claire, a Holocaust survivor, encounter group aficionado, who began to run some very touchy-feely groups with those oil riggers. And after some initial resistance, the men began to tell their life stories to one another, stories of addiction and illness, of abuse and trauma. They all poured out along with tears. And through this vulnerability, the bravado released its hold on them, and outside of the emotional realm of their own stories, they began to share with one another when they were uncertain in their jobs. Where before they had to maintain that false sense of certainty as a way of staying safe, now they could express when they did not know, ask for help when they needed, and as a result, during the time that Claire Noir was working with the Shell oil riggers, there was an 84% drop in the accidents across Shell. We don't always know what it is. It's not, I don't know who came up with the idea, bring her in, but it probably was not a top executive's corporate plan for how we're going to reduce accidents on our oil rigs. It's not always the immediate, logical, rational idea that will save us. We were talking a little bit about quantum particles. You know a little bit about quantum physics, right? Just, enough that, strange attraction is a phrase you've heard. Me too. We're in the same, I think we're at the same, it's kind of like we all know a little bit about this whole quantum physics thing, but we don't really understand how it works. And I think that's actually kind of like how our emotional processes in groups are. How family systems, the root of how we learn what it means to be a part of a group is. We are, like we were talking about last week, we are not solitary individuals. You can't separate out an individual, partly because last week we were talking about all the parts inside of us, but also because we are built in relationship. We are made up of our relationships. And the way they work is weird. The first time I dropped out of college, I came home and I was in a mental health crisis. I needed my family to be there for me. And as soon as I got home, do you know what the first thing my brother did was? He got sick. And I came to our family therapist who we were seeing, and I pointed it out of like, look, here it is. He can't let the attention, the spotlight be on me even for a moment. And she took that in and told me we weren't going to go there because my brother was not going to understand what I was talking about. But it is weird, and it does happen. We are more connected, our physiology and our emotional relationships, in ways that we can't fully understand. Okay, so what do you know about triangles? How many kinds of triangles are there? Yeah? There we go, isosceles, thank you. Okay, what else we got? Equilateral, isosceles, equilateral, and? Right? And scalene, yeah, that's the one I always forget. Okay, and then the angles that happen in triangles, we learned this, right? Obtuse, acute, good, and, yeah, right? Okay. 180. What? Oh, it all had to add up to 100. Oh, good. Okay, so we know a lot of rules about triangles. How about Pythagorean theorem? You learned Pythagorean theorem. Yeah, you got it. Okay. How many of you have used Pythagorean theorem since you graduated high school? Oh, that's good. Okay, almost a third of us maybe. I've only maybe once or twice to play role-playing games. Okay. We all learned these geometrical rules of triangles, but I'm guessing that no one here was taught in your high school curriculum about the emotional rules of triangles. Despite the fact that, at least from a family systems perspective, our lives are built from them. You remember Buckminster Fuller talked about the triangle as the most stable shape. And it's true. That's why he had made those geodesic domes like we have up at Freestone out of these triangles. And it's the most stable shape in relationship as well. We will always, when the anxiety between two people is high enough, we'll always find a way to triangle in a third. This was Murray Bowen's theory of family systems. So I've been going to give you a little bit of it today. We'll see. We'll talk about it, I'm sure, in time to come. But Edwin Friedman, who was a rabbi, took his theory and said, oh, this is just how not only do families work that way, all organizations, and especially religious organizations. He said that the family is the true ecumenical experience of all humankind. How we learn to navigate self and other, safety and vulnerability in family is the fundamental human experience, the ecumenical experience of all humankind. And these triangles, they form out of the tension that is inherent between the togetherness force and the individuality force. We're all looking for togetherness, and we're all looking to be ourselves, and that tension forms these triangles. Now, when I mention triangulation, and you might already be going there right now, the response is back off, like there's a poisonous spider in the room. I don't want to be triangulated, right? You don't want to be triangulated. The thing is, you are in a constant state of triangulation. We are born, by being born, you are triangulated. In fact, it happens even before you're born, right? How much do we talk about a baby on the way in our families? All the expectations and hopes, all the pressures, these triangles are the norm. They're the default experience. So we can't avoid being triangulated. What we can, though, do is learn how triangles work. What are the predictable patterns of the emotional processes of triangles, and how do we make choices in response to them? So it's not about learning to avoid them, but better understanding how they work. I'm not expecting anybody to understand these 7 laws, to remember 7 things right now, but I'm going to walk you through them because I think it's such a valuable framework. So Friedman says that the first law of triangles is that the relationship between 2 parts of the triangle is kept in balance by the way that the third part relates to each of their relationships. And in my family growing up, this looked like my brother and I maintained a kind of constant simmer of hostility. It was nearly, unshakable, that constant simmer of hostility, but it very rarely blew up into something bigger because of the way that our mom related to us. Her relationship with each of us and her relationship to our hostility maintained its constant simmer. The second rule is that when you're the third party in a triangle, you can't bring about change for more than a week, Friedman says, by trying to influence the relationship between the other two. Mom, she wanted us to get along so badly. She pushed and cajoled. She did everything she knew to get us to get along, but she could not convince either of us to like each other any better. Friedman says it may well be that in the history of our species, no family member, upon trying to correct the perception of another family member about a third, has ever received the response, "You're right, honey. I don't know why I didn't see it that way myself." You can't change the relationship between 2 other people, no matter how hard you try. Attempts to change the relationship on the other 2 sides of an emotional triangle, the relationship between the other 2 parts, are not only generally ineffective, this is the third rule, but actually end up reinforcing the status quo. Because one of the properties of systems, the reason that they exist, these triangles, is to maintain homeostasis, to keep things safe and the same. So in fact, all that pressure that Mom was putting on us to get along, it only helped us dig in our heels and our stances against each other. Fourth, he says the extent that a party to an emotional triangle tries unsuccessfully to change the relationship between the other two, the more likely it is that the third party will wind up holding the stress for the other two. Oh, how it killed my mom that we wouldn't get along. We were actually quite fine with the way things were, my brother and I, more or less, but it was a source of agony for her. The identified issue that brought us back to therapy over and over. And that position, if you're trying to take care of, manage the relationship between the other two in the triangle, they call that the burnout position. Source of burnout for a lot of folks in helping professions. Okay, fifth, the various triangles in an emotional system, they interlock so that efforts to bring change in any one of them is often resisted by the homeostatic forces of the broader system that they exist in. So we're not just in one triangle, we're in a series of interlocking triangles. My brother and I, we neatly divided all of life's activities up between us. He did sports, I did theater. I went to church. He stopped going in 3rd grade, and he studies rocks. When one side of an emotional triangle tends to be more conflictual than the others. But in a healthier system, there's more ability for that conflict to move around. In a less healthy system, it gets stuck. When my life upended at the beginning of the pandemic and I got divorced, my brother moved in with me. And we, a couple of short years later, had gone on amazing camping trips together, traveled internationally, and bought a home together. We can only change a relationship to which we belong is the last rule. And the way to bring about any change is to focus on our relationship with the other two, not theirs. To define those relationships clearly. You know, I think it was too much to expect probably as a kid for me to figure out how to make that relationship with my brother work, with my annoying little brother. But when we're able to take an adult responsibility for our relationships, we find that more choices exist than we may have realized. And the silver nugget, the beautiful gem at the end, Friedman says, is the most triangled position in any set of relationships is always the most vulnerable. But when the laws of triangles, emotional triangles, are understood, it becomes the most powerful. That in the vulnerability lies the power. This is what we're going to wrap our series on masks up with a couple of weeks from now. But this is the paradox of relationships, that the vulnerable becomes the most powerful, that the self, the capacity for self, is developed through relationship. There was a project happening in Marin when I was serving up there to get a new Housing First initiative underway. This is part of Project Home Key happening across the state of California, Housing First. They wanted to put a nursing home, a former nursing home that had been not used for years, 50 homes there, and of course the NIMBY folks showed up to protest, so we were getting involved as a congregation to say, yes, no, we can do this. This is a good idea. But the NIMBY folks came with that idea that putting those people in our community is going to make us less safe. That's what keeps our children safe, is keeping people out. And I fundamentally think it's a mistake. It actually makes us less safe to make that emotional distance. That safety comes through presence and touching the places where there's vulnerability. The scripture tells us, love your neighbor, not once they're clean and sober, not once they've got a job and a proof of income, but love your neighbor as yourself. And so to engage in relationships of justice, it requires us to build capacity for self, to trust that safety is possible through engaging authentically, vulnerably with presence. The logic of the dominant culture tells us that if you stay entangled in these mutual networks of obligation, that will keep you safe. That's what love is. But love as mutual obligation, that's what leads me away from sharing my real truth. And so may we practice instead love as resistance, love as vulnerability, love as becoming real with one another so that more relationships of justice, of newness and possibility may emerge. May it be so. And amen.
We invite you now into the spiritual practice of generosity. And I think about what I just said, I realize it's a mask. Because we're going to ask you to give us some money. Instead of passing the plate, you can give electronically by scanning the QR code on the back of your badge. Or you can put a cash or check donation into the donation envelope that you'll find in the back of the pew in front of you. Write your name on it and mark offering plate or pledge, and then put it into the donation box, which is beside the fountain right outside the atrium as you leave the service. And each week, half of the offering plate is shared with a nonprofit Good Neighbor organization recommended by our wonderful Social Justice Council. And thank you so much for practicing generosity with UUCB and with our good neighbors. Offerings of any amount are accepted with gratitude. The good neighbor for this month is the Berkeley Food Pantry. The Berkeley Food Pantry's mission is to provide good, nutritious groceries, household items, and opportunities for learning and self-improvement for Berkeley and Albany households in crisis, especially those households at risk of upheaval and displacement. Thank you so much. Please join me in dedicating our offering. We dedicate our offering and ourselves to the mission of this congregation, to create loving community, inspire spiritual growth, and encourage lives of integrity, joy, and service.
I'll just let you know about a few things happening in the life of our community. If you are new to us and you would like more information, feel free to find the greeters at the welcome table in the atrium after the service. They'd be glad to answer any questions you have. Today, after the service in the fireside room, there's a candidates forum where you're going to be electing new representatives to the Board of Trustees next month. So stick around for that if you can. That's happening today, right after the service. It's Michael DeWitt and Beth Dirty and Helen Toy who are our nominees for the board. So thank you for your willingness to serve and for the nominating committee's hard work in finding you. I also want to let you know enrollment for Chalice Circles is open now through February 11th for the Spring Chalice Circles. This is really just such a wonderful way to have those relationships where we can get in touch with a more vulnerable, authentic self with others. So please, if you are available, if you can fit it in your schedule, sign up for a Chalice Circle, get to know some new folks in our community. The Freestone Committee is hosting dinner and film night on Friday, February 2nd, and you can get tickets in advance at the table in the atrium, the Freestone table. Come watch ET together and have a good time. And then a charming pre-Valentine's event is coming, as every year. Love songs and chocolate. It's going to be on February 10th, 7 p.m., It's folks from our music program putting on this fundraiser as they do each year. I hear that there's 24 chocolate balls already made. 48. It just, they keep multiplying. So please be there if you can. Let's rise once more in body or in spirit and sing a final hymn, I Know I Can.
Though days be dark with storms and burdens weigh my heart, though troubles weigh at every turn, I know I can go on. When sorrow heals my soul and burdens make me strong, though troubles weigh at every turn, I know I can go on. My sisters in my heart, my brother in my song, though troubles weigh at every turn, I know I can go on. And though the journey's long, the destination is near, though troubles weigh at every turn, I know I can go on. So brothers, take my hand, and sisters, take my song. When hope awaits at every turn, I know I can go on.
Reach out a hand, touch a shoulder, or link an elbow, or whatever's safe enough for you. May we be safe enough. And may those of us who have had more than our share of safety take the risks to touch the world with the vulnerable and raw places it needs to transform. May it be so, and amen.